Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if all those studies about social media and teenagers are actually, well, trustworthy? Today we're diving into a fascinating study that asks exactly that question. In a world where everyone's talking about how social media affects young people's minds, how do we know what the science is actually telling us? It turns out, when things get this heated and important, how researchers do their work matters a whole lot. So here's the big picture. We hear all the time that social media is either a supervillain ruining teen mental health or maybe not so bad. This debate is huge. It is influencing laws like new rules in the US and EU, and even a total ban on social media for under 16s in Australia, partly influenced by a very popular book. But, as this paper points out, there are serious concerns about how solid the science is behind these big decisions. That is where transparency comes in. Think of transparency like leaving your work out for everyone to see. It means showing your homework, your data, and how you crunch the numbers. This allows other scientists to check your work to see if you got the right answer or if your findings were just a fluke. In fields with lots of debate and high stakes, like this one. This kind of openness is super important. It helps us trust the science or at least understand its limits. So this study wanted to find out just how transparent the research is in this whole social media and teen mental health discussion. They looked at a bunch of studies that were basically gathered by some prominent researchers who believe social media is really bad for teens. They didn't do a massive exhaustive search of every single study out there. Instead, they focused on the papers that a really influential group in this debate uses to back up their arguments. This way, they could see how transparent the foundation of a major policy position actually is. They took this list of studies and then they looked at each one to see if the researchers had followed 8 key transparency practices. They checked things like, did they share their data? Did they share their step-by-step analysis plan? Did they share their actual code for analyzing the data? Did they use guidelines to make sure they reported everything clearly? And did they make their research freely available to everyone? Not locked behind a paywall. So what did they find? Well, some things were pretty good. For instance, around 3/4 of the studies were open access, meaning anyone could read them. And most of them included statements about who funded the research and whether there were any conflicts of interest. These are important for giving context, but here is where it gets a bit worrying. When it came to the core practices that really let other scientists dig in and verify the work, like sharing data, sharing analysis scripts, and sharing the materials they use, these things were rare. Really rare, less than 15% of the studies did these things. And pre-registration, which is like filing your research plan with the world before you even start, was even less common. Only about 8% of the studies they looked at actually had a pre-registration that they could access. And for sharing data, materials, and analysis scripts, it was mostly around 13 to 14%. This is a big deal. Even when studies said they were sharing data, the researchers sometimes couldn't actually get it. Links were broken, or the instructions were confusing, and when they did find reasons why data wasn't shared, the most common one was to protect participant privacy. While that is important, the paper notes that there are often ways to share data responsibly, like anonymizing it, but authors just didn't do it. And for analysis scripts, which is basically the recipe for how they analyze their results, over 80% of the studies didn't say anything about them. This makes it incredibly hard for anyone else to check if the analysis was done correctly. Even using reporting guidelines, which are like checklists, to make sure all the important details are included was also very uncommon. So, what does all this mean? The authors are pretty clear in a field that is so contentious. With such high stakes for policy, this widespread lack of transparency really hurts the credibility of the evidence. It makes it difficult for scientists and policymakers to really get a handle on what the science is saying. They point out that this isn't just a problem in this one area. Transparency has been a concern in psychology for a while, and while things are slowly improving, they're still not where they need to be, especially for practices that allow for real verification. Pre-registration is highlighted as particularly important here. In collaborations with social media companies, pre-registration can really help set clear boundaries and protect independent researchers. The challenges of data sharing are acknowledged, but the paper also stresses that often there are ways around these challenges, like anonymization. And if not, authors should at least explain why they can't share. They note that only a handful of studies in their sample actually gave a reason for not sharing. The discussion also touches on the power imbalance between academic and industry researchers. Industry often has much easier access to vast amounts of data on young users, data that academics struggle to get. This makes transparency even more crucial for independent researchers to be able to verify claims. Now, like any good study, this one has its limitations. The authors are upfront about this. They focused on the transparency practices they and others consider most important, but not every single one. They also did minimal quality checks on the shared data, just checking if it was there, not if it was well documented or reproducible. And they acknowledged that if they had directly asked authors for data or materials, they might have gotten more. Though they also know that these requests often go unanswered. So, what is the takeaway? The core message is that transparency isn't just a nice to have, it is fundamental to good science, especially when the science is informing big decisions that affect people's lives. When research isn't open to scrutiny, it erodes trust and makes it harder to build reliable knowledge. The authors suggest that improving transparency will need effort from everyone involved: journals, funding bodies, institutions, and of course the researchers themselves. Journals could make transparency a requirement, and we might need new ways to ensure that industry. Academia research collaborations are fair and transparent. Ultimately, when governments are making laws and policies that impact young people so deeply based on this research, that research absolutely needs to be open to independent checking. It is about ensuring that the decisions we make are based on the most solid, verifiable evidence possible. It is pretty mind-blowing to think about how much we're still figuring out about social media and mental health, and how much we rely on research to guide us. This study really shines a light on the importance of not just what research finds, but how it is done. It makes you realize how important it is for scientists to be open about their work, so we can all understand it better and trust the conclusions. What do you guys think? Does this make you question some of the headlines you see about social media and teens? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more deep dives into the science of our minds. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.